I must begin at a point by which all of the accumulated actions of the past arrive for me to tell you to what was worthy of a beginning. By this point, I was already diagnosed with schizophrenia, and I had been in and out of 2 different psychiatric wards on accounts of my erratic relationship with a disrupted reality. What was interesting to note between these 2 episodes was how they were instigated by my revelations of my own ethnicity. I grew up in a white flight neighborhood, which meant that I never was actually confronted with my own brown skin until my teen years. So when I got too high one day, I began to have delusions that I was being hunted and persecuted by white men in suits. That was the premise for my first episode. My second episode was much more internally disruptive. I had extremely strong ideas of my reality being a dream, or that I could somehow shape my existence to exist for thousands of years like some of the demigods in Buddhist mythology. I thought I was telepathic and so on and so forth as to the illusions, and I was ecstatic in the wake of this chaotic disruption of reality. It was terrifying, but strangely addictive. I'll now have to throw us into the climaxes of my story. By this moment, I was completely insane with delusions that would morph to fit the situation perfectly to maintain my feedback loop. There was one thing that I was certain about which guided me, and it was the thought of invoking Leninist revolution. In one of my classes, a woman who I was greatly infatuated with inspired me by her Marxist ideas, and to me, desiring her meant that I must desire revolution itself. I was also in a philosophical logic class too, where I was interested in another woman who wanted to be a lawyer. To me, she represented the state in Deleuzian terms, and its method of logic, categorization, exploitation, and communication. I was, or I thought I was, telepathically communicating to the Mesoamerican god Ometeotl when he told me that my answer would be in a 6-letter word. After some time of thought, the 2 words that came to my mind were dragon and knight, and it was here that the god of duality gave me a choice, a positive or negative that manifested my will in its dichotomy. I then realized that each word was associated with each of my loves. The Marxist was the dragon operating in chaos and destruction, and the lawyer was the knight who was to complete the hero's journey and return home within the confines of the state. I chose to be the dragon, and it was here that I was confronted with the strange idea that, inspired by Dostoevsky, I had now created a double who challenges the authority of my identity. It was the strangest feeling that I ever had when I thought that I myself could be the false double, the ghost of another person's real power. So I knew I must kill him, whoever he was, and I started to search for him throughout the city that I was in. By this point, it must have been after midnight, and the streets were black and empty. I eventually came across a homeless man lying on some chairs near a train station, mumbling, searching to himself repeatedly. I took that as my sign to venture from my double on the train tracks, and after walking for some time, I saw a light appear from a distance away. I was certain this was my double in all of his dark removing glory, and I knew that in order to kill him, my double, I must acquire 3 items to assist my fight. Some wrapped up tinfoil that I put underneath my shirt as my shining armor, a shard of plate as my sword, and a Disney Mickey Mouse mister as my projectile. However, I knew that if I was the dragon, I shouldn't be wearing knight's armor. And as I got closer, I had to deal with this reality that I may have to be both in order to be the real myself in a holistic way. It was the train. The light was the train that was coming at me. And it was clear that my double was much stronger than I in terms of magic, as he was able to manifest a train to almost kill me there. I wondered here who I could be now that I could no longer be myself. I fell asleep under a bridge that night and had intense dreams of being Che Guevara. However, I was somehow captured by the CIA and tortured with extreme doses of LSD in my sleep paralysis. I was then under the impression that I needed to make a voyage to create my militia. And in the throes of delusion and ignorance, I decided to search for my army amidst the Southern Californian gangs. I wanted to unite the gangs in order to create a formidable force that could stand its own in guerrilla warfare. At this time, I thought I was able to enter the ranks of the Crips, telepathically explaining to them how my own cousin was killed by Bloods in a violent incident. They told me that my role was to become a lawyer, and I could represent their cause for revolution, and I was given the name Crybaby Che, the judicial antichrist, because of how frequently I cried when speaking to them about capitalist dispossession. In this, they told me that I was the chief pontificative executive officer of their recruitment causes. I began to go down the streets with speeches of revolution, saying such as, "I've seen through the hot summer day, the blistered and boiling sun commanding an oppressive, unsubstantial heat. It was empty and nauseous. I suppose what I mean to say is that no one has managed to wield a hoe to the rhythm of the sun, and no one has yet reaped grain with love and grace." I eventually was confronted with the idea that I must recruit my forces from the depths of hell in order to amass a truly revolutionary army to battle the decrepit labor values of Protestant America. However, in order to reach this group of demons, I must kill Satan himself. So I did what any human would do in the face of the devil. I passed out and defecated in my crybaby fashion. I woke up in an ambulance. Immediately, I thought that I was going to be augmented into a cybernetic tool of war for the state and began to bargain with my abductees. I told them that I was God, that I was God's clown laughing as one with the dead. What I didn't realize until they began to take my shorts off was that I was just getting a much-needed diaper change. I ended up in a psychiatric ward again, and they related my identity with the missing person who was myself. I remember looking in the mirror and remarking how beautiful I looked, as I had never been that skinny in my life. I was gone for 5 or 6 days total, and I did not recount much of the story here and what had occurred, especially the extremely profane. Some of what I said was a lie, but most was truth reduced in simplifications. I feel to this day that my medications have reduced much of my capacity to be anything but a wall by which I block my humanity and project my ideas of life in the place of my actual experiences. I am the mask that I wear, and I am the clay of my past that cannot find form. My only entry into society will be my labors, as my debt to myself as God and his child will never be repaid. In this I will fall from the footlights as an actor who never learned to properly dance.